Welcome to our 38th episode of The World of Running. I'm your host, Aditi Pandya. There has been a lot of studies on sleep and how sleep affects the quality of life. Sleep is such a basic need that it affects our mood, efficiency, longevity, and most importantly, for our listeners, it improves our running performance. Sleep is the basic need for maintaining and nurturing our relationship, growth of the society, and many more intrinsic necessities. While while I was preparing for today's episode and I was reading about sleep, I discovered a person who sleeps for less than 7 hours a day for 10 straight days has as much harmful effects on themselves as much a person drinking to their drinking capacity. Sleep releases hormones that aids in muscle protein synthesis, thus repairing the cellular level damage from exercises. It improves our reflexes, decision making capacity, and overall keeps our mind and body working at an optimal level. In this episode, we will be discussing the fascinating world of sleep and its impact on life, health, and more importantly, running performance. Before I go any further in today's episode, I have a request for all our listeners. If you like our podcast, please leave a rating on your preferred platform. Also, share with other fellow runners who are yet to discover us. If you like our podcast and looking for even more tips to boost your running, head over to our YouTube channel that is Geeks on Feet and hit the subscribe button. We also have an informative weekly newsletter that brings all the latest from the world of running straight to your inbox. You can sign up for our newsletter today, and the links are in the show notes. Our guest for this episode is Dr. Sudhir Kumar. Dr. Sudhir Kumar is a neurologist. He has been a medical practitioner for the past 30 years. He enjoys his work and loves solving complex neurological problems. He treats his patients from across the world. His motto in medical practice is prompt diagnosis of diseases, early initiation of treatment, and offers the best treatment at the lowest possible cost. Dr. Sudhir took up running at the age of 49. He loves running and training at lower heart rates. At 49, before he started running, he weighed about 100 kgs. Running has transformed him, and he's very active on the platform X and regularly posts about neurology, medicine, fitness, running, and nutrition. Welcome to today's episode, Dr. Sudhir.
Thank you, Aditi, and also Geeks on Feet for this podcast. And I'm very happy to be here.
So, doctor, I have been in the last 1 year, especially tracking my sleep, and the days I have a good sleep, I'm more productive throughout the day on the following day, right? So, for starters, can you help us to understand the various stages of sleep and the science behind and its importance?
Yes, as you mentioned, sleep is one of the most important functions or parts of our lives, and that we can understand by the fact that we spent one third of our lives sleeping. So, if somebody is, let's say, aged 60 years, he has spent 20 years sleeping, and so his actual life is only 40 years. So, that is besides the point. And I think coming back to your question about the stages of sleep, so first, it's a transition. So first is the wakeful state, and then slowly we drift into sleep. And so there is a short period of say 5 minutes or so when it's a we are in the border zone of being awake and sleepy, and then we drift into something called as light sleep, which is the stage one. That doesn't last too long, maybe 5 or 10 minutes, and then we move on to stage two, which is slightly deeper sleep, and then that could form almost, let's say, little almost one third of our sleep. But the most important part is the stage three sleep, which is the deepest part of our sleep, and that is when most of the important functions, or say recovery, or repair, those things happen. And then the last part, or the stage four, is what is called as REM phase of sleep, REM stands for rapid eye movements. In that, basically, the most important part, the fascinating part of dreams. So we dream in that phase. And but actually, even though these phases are different, but all of these are important. They have their own functions, and these come in a cycle. So during sleep, these cycles repeat several times. So typically, one cycle lasts for about say 90 minutes, and one could have say 4 to 5 such cycles before the entire sleep is completed.
So, doctor, now I want to say ask you that I hear and overhear often that people keep talking about a minimum of 7 to 8 hours of sleep is a must for an individual to work productively, and as you mentioned that more than anything else, it is the deep sleep or the light sleep and the REM stages that contribute to a good sleep. So, can you talk to us about whether it is the number of hours or the quality of sleep that actually impacts our overall productivity?
That's a very important question. So both quality and the quantity they matter. So first we'll discuss about the quantity. As you correctly mentioned, it is 7 to 9 hours. And since this podcast is for runners, so those who are meaning good runners or let's say elite runners, they need on the higher end of this duration. So they require about say 8 to 9 hours. And those who are running low volumes, possibly for them the lowest limit should be 7 hours. And there could be individual variations so that each person can find out. But lesser than 7 hours is not recommended. And the second part is the quality of sleep also. It is not just how much time we spend on the bed. So basically, it should be restful sleep, which, so morning when the person wakes up, they should feel fresh and ready to take on the running and other activities that has been planned for. And that could happen if the person is free from any kind of baggage or stress, anxiety, and tension, and also free from various other things which I'm sure it is there in your subsequent questions. So intake of various things. So basically, if somebody is taking medications or other things, it can affect the quality of sleep also. So one should have a good quality of sleep, which means they should go through proper proportion of all these phases of sleep what we discussed, and also the duration of sleep. So both matter.
Understood. And you rightly talked about something known as anxiety, right? And which I'm sure I definitely am part of it, and few other fellow runners who, especially before the races, or at times when I'm too tired or anxious before races, and that's especially time when I struggle to sleep. And can you talk about what neurotransmitters or chemicals are at work when we are stressed and anxious, and how can we get past through these chemicals for a better sleep?
So stress, anxiety, or depression, they are all negative things. They are all mood disorders, and they are not good for anyone, especially for runners, because any amount of stress, anxiety, and depression, this can affect the quantity and quality of sleep, which in turn will affect the running performance and other performances also at work. So definitely, and as you mentioned, the chemicals, the most important chemical is the serotonin, and then other chemicals like gamma aminobutyric acid, which is GABA, and glutamate. So these are the chemicals which are mainly at role, and also in the acute phase, suppose somebody has intense fear and anxiety suddenly, so that time norepinephrine and what is called adrenaline or epinephrine is released. So these are all harmful because they will increase the heart rate. Person can have palpitations, they can have sweating. So all of these things can affect the quality of sleep, and also the negativity creeps in. So the person feels that he or she may not be able to perform well in the race the next day. So it's like it's a vicious cycle, and then if the person doesn't sleep, so definitely the performance will go down. So what is required is basically, one is we have to do various things to soothe our minds, in that mindfulness, meditation, listening to light music or something which you enjoy, divert your mind, speak to someone who you love or like. So many things or read a book, take a warm shower. So various things one can do to get rid of this anxiety, or think of the events where you have earlier done very well. So that can give you some confidence to face this. For the first time runner, it may be difficult, but of course, anything else where you have excelled in the past, any practice run or training run, so all those things can give one confidence, and this anxiety can be reduced, and the person can go off to sleep.
Sure. Sure. So this was also one of the questions that one of our runners had posted on our Twitter handle, because we were asking questions if they have any particular questions to ask you, doctor. So this was one of them. And okay, so I want to move on, and especially while I was doing research for today's episode, I found that athletes who sleep less than 7 hours are more prone to injuries, and they also make more fouls during a game. That's generally because of lack of alertness. And can you let us know how sleep affects a sportsman's or a person's performance?
See, we can divide this into, say, two parts. One is the cognitive part of the sports, and second is the actual endurance or the performance of on the sport. So, if you look at the cognitive part, in running also, a person has to make multiple strategies. Like if
Yeah.
somebody is running a marathon or half marathon, so where he has to race, where he needs to slow down, when the hydration is required, when the nutrition is required, and how the strategy should be in the last 5 or 10 kilometers. So all these things require planning and execution. So if someone has not slept properly, obviously the mind will be totally muddled, and they may not remember what strategy they have planned, and or they may fail to take decisions, or suddenly they face a weather which is unexpected. It is hot and humid, so the plan B is required at that stage. So where if somebody hasn't slept properly, so this cognitive processing may not happen at that time, and then it can result in a disaster or not up to the mark performance. So that's the cognitive part of it. If you look at the actual the performance on the race day, so definitely those who have slept well, or those who had a good sleep in the previous night, performance will be better. So they're because good sleep improves the running pace. In running, what matters is the pace for many runners. So that is better, strong finish. And you also mentioned about the risk of injuries. So injuries definitely increase. So because sleep has a lot of restorative properties, and a good sleep helps in the healing of because training also makes multiple injuries. A person gets minor injuries like strains and stretches and tears in the muscle, so they are not obvious externally, but that healing and repair is taking place in the night time when we sleep. So a person who doesn't sleep properly, already his muscles and tendons may not have healed properly. And on the race day, when the person is putting up his best, there is a risk of that tendon just tearing, or something is happening just on that day. So that's how the risk of injuries also increase.
Understood. So, doctor, as I mentioned to you earlier, that I now have I wear my Garmin, and I actually check on my sleep score, and naturally it also helps me to check my resting heart rate, and I have noted that sleep affects my resting heart rate significantly. So and I have also read that athletes who sleep less tend to have a lower glycogen store. So, if it is true, can you talk about sleep and how it affects our endurance?
Yes, so I think the question was regarding the impact of sleep on the resting heart rate and also on the glycogen stores. So we'll take it up in two parts. First, the resting heart rate. So resting heart rate, which is a lower resting heart rate, is desirable for most of us. And luckily, most of the runners and long distance runners, especially, they have a lower resting heart rate. And it is important because lower resting heart rate is associated with lower risk of diabetes, high blood pressure, heart attacks, strokes, even cancer. And people with lower resting heart rate have greater longevity also. And one of the ways of reducing lower resting heart rate is to have a good sound sleep, and that is the simplest thing to do. Other things that could help is lowering the body weight in a person who's overweight or obese, and then training at lower intensity, lower pace, which is like typically 180 minus age. So these are some of the strategies, and avoiding smoking and alcohol also can help in lowering the resting heart rate. And so sleep definitely lowers the resting heart rate. And those who don't sleep properly, and we can see the very next day immediately the resting heart rate will be up. And also those who have chronic sleep deprivation, the resting heart rate will be much higher, and that can affect the running performances also. And the second part was glycogen stores. So while we are awake during wakefulness, the glycogen stores in the brain as well as muscle gets depleted, And during the sleep phase, this glycogen slowly gets replenished, and that is useful because that can be used in the energy when we need the energy while running or while doing any other activity the next day.
So, doctor, how does sleep help in recovery from running and strength workouts? So, can you talk about how the body starts repairing itself while they are still sleeping and reducing soreness, better reflexes, etc.?
So, as I briefly mentioned earlier, during the stage 3 sleep, which is the deeper sleep, that is also the restorative sleep when most of our tissues they are trying to recuperate or get restored or recover. And one of the ways by which it happens is the growth hormone secretion. So, growth hormone secretions occurs typically during sleep, and people who sleep more, they are the ones who are have more growth hormone secretion, and that helps in the recovery or regeneration of the damaged tissue. And then other things which can also help is basically the muscle tone is also lower in this uh, phase of the sleep, and also this REM phase of the sleep. And that way, during the running and various exercises, there is stiffness and rigidity in the muscles, and we need to relax those muscles. So that also helps in the recovery. And I also mentioned that there'll be this micro tears in the muscles, and there is something called as myofibrillar protein synthesis, which typically happens during sleep. So those protein synthesis actually will help in the recovery of the healing of the muscle tissue, increased muscle growth, and even those, because most of us do cross training also, runners, and then we need to increase the muscle bulk and the muscle mass, and that also typically happens during sleep. It's not that the workouts and the protein intake is they are not enough. We need to sleep also so that the protein synthesis can take place. So these are the various mechanisms by which recovery and healing takes place during sleep.
So, doctor, I want to talk to you about sleep and its impact on our cardiovascular system, especially because we've seen several episodes of heart attacks and other cardiac episodes in in seemingly fit people, right? Especially runners. So, can you talk about lack of sleep and how it affects our heart health, and what are the possible health risks for endurance athlete for lack of sleep?
It is possibly one of the most important parts of this podcast, because running is a healthy habit, and we don't want any, even a single heart attack or death in a runner. And we should do everything generally. Running definitely improves the health, and most runners are healthy. But there are few things we need to look after or take care, and one of them is the good sleep. And studies across in the last 3 to 4 decades, several good studies have been done which have shown that lower the number of hours of sleep, greater is the risk of heart attack. And this happens mainly because the risk factors for heart attack, like diabetes, obesity, insulin resistance, high cholesterol, all of these risk factors they increase as the number of hours of sleep reduce. And also there is something called a U-shaped curve. So it is not that if sleep is good, we'll sleep for say 10 to 12 hours. So oversleeping also is bad, and typically oversleeping is those who sleep more than 10 hours. So that also should be avoided. But undersleeping or sleeping less is a greater risk. So, and it's a dose response. So if somebody sleeps, let's say 6 hours, he has higher risk of getting heart attack. But if someone sleeps only 5 hours, that person has a greater risk than somebody who slept for 6 hours, and 4 hours even greater risk. So lower the number of hours of sleep, greater is the risk of heart attack. And so that is one of the things one has to take care. So it is not important to exercise and take care of healthy diet. It is also important to have adequate amount of sleep in order to have good heart health.
Yeah. So, so doctor, we are recreational runners and we are constantly juggling between our priorities of life and running. And at times you'll see that people have late night calls and early morning training, and this actually becomes part of our routine. So, what are some of the ways runners can deal with this kind of situation and yet manage their appropriate hours of sleep? So, are there any tools like will napping and meditating help in this?
This is another important aspect, and as you mentioned the word recreational runner, so my answer also will be only for recreational runners, because those who are elite runners and professional runners, For them it's a totally different game, because for them it's training, running, and sleeping, and the diet, no job. But most of us are recreational runners, which means we have a family to look after. There is a full-time job to take care of. So we should have realistic expectation from our running, and we should strike a balance between our professional life and the running. So we should not overdo it. So first is to fix up a target, which is manageable, and it is not excessive. So one could choose. It's not a fixed number. It could be 25 kilometers of running in a week. It could be 50. It could be 60. So the person has to see, depending on what he or she is planning for, training for, that can be chosen. And then one kind of healthy discipline is required, depending on the number of hours of professional work and also sleep, because we also discuss sleep. So in a 24-hour period, if the job is 10 hours and plus the sleep is 7 to 8 hours, so the for running and exercise only 1 to 2 hours are left, because we need family time also. So basically one timetable and a routine is required to strike a balance. And then, despite all that, sometimes one may not get adequate time to sleep at night. So there are two things. One is, the best option is to increase the night sleep itself. If somebody is sleeping only 6 hours, the simplest thing is, if he can make it 7 hours, that is better. But let's assume that the person has, office till late evenings, and he or she cannot get more than 6 hours. Then the second best is what you mentioned, is the napping. So there is nothing wrong in napping. So those who cannot get their entire sleep quota in one go, like say night, they can always have, say, 1 hour of afternoon nap, and try to make up the lost sleep, because that is better than missing the sleep altogether. So, and then you also mentioned meditation and mindfulness. That also helps, because if somebody doesn't fall asleep, because once you go to bed, the sleep should come in 10 to 15 minutes time. But if somebody is not getting sleep, their mindfulness meditation can help. A warm shower also can help. So I think there are few, and also we have to have a good sleep hygiene, because what has been shown is that if we have a fixed time to go to sleep, let's say 10 p.m., don't alter by more than 30 minutes. Because one day 10 p.m., next day 12 midnight, third day 2 a.m., so even if we sleep for say 7 hours, say from 2 a.m. to 9 a.m. one day, and 12 midnight to 7 a.m., and 10 p.m. to 5 p.m., the outcomes will not be healthy. So we need to have a sleep onset time which is fixed, that is called sleep hygiene, which can vary by 30 minutes this way or that way. And that way, we are not upsetting the circadian rhythm or the biological clock. And also the health outcomes are better in those people.
Understood. So, doctor, sleep is also affected by many other lifestyle choices, be it nutrition and diet, and one of them is alcohol, right? And how does alcohol affect our sleep and recovery?
So first, I'll give one very simple, straightforward answer. So alcohol has got no benefits on health or running. Now, just to explain it further, even some people may say, "How about just one drink? Will it affect?" So studies have shown that even a single drink will adversely affect our sleep quality by 9%. So it's a negative impact. And then as the number of drinks increases, the impact is even more. So those who take two drinks, it can be 29% poorer quality of sleep. And those who have more than two, say three or four, it becomes 34% poor quality of sleep. And next thing is, we also discussed that in running we need the cognition and thinking and strategy for the next day. So those who have had a drink of alcohol the previous night, their brains cannot work, and we all know that, because alcohol affects decision making, and they can make vital mistakes, while running, which can cost them in terms of their performance, or even otherwise the risk of injuries, falling, accidents. While driving, drunken driving causes accidents. So drunk and running can also cause more injuries. Why not? So that is about alcohol. Alcohol generally, even alcohol binge. Suddenly, if someone takes more amount of alcohol, can cause more severe issues. And also, other thing I want to highlight here is that the sleep architecture, so that gets affected by alcohol. So we also mentioned that sleep has various stages, like from light to deep, like, and then to REM phase. But those who take alcohol, they directly go into the deeper part of the sleep, so they don't have very restorative sleep. So they may spend, say, let's say 7 hours on the bed, but when they wake up the next day, they are groggy and cranky because they haven't had a good, all the phases are not there. So that sleep quality and architecture also gets affected by alcohol. So one answer advice is that avoid alcohol. Those who can't, keep it to the lowest possible.
Understood. So I have another one, which is caffeine, and I'm sure a lot of my friends are guilty, including me. I mean, I'm definitely very guilty of having coffee. And as runners, we also depend a lot on caffeine for performance and alertness, right? So, what are some of the best practices for those caffeine drinkers to ensure the sleep is not affected?
See, first there are two main points I will tell in the beginning. So number one is that not everybody is caffeine sensitive. So which means that caffeine is known to disrupt sleep and adversely affect sleep, but not everyone gets affected. So if you are one of the persons whose sleep is not affected due to caffeine, you don't need to take any action because caffeine has many health related benefits, and one can have 3 to 5 cups of coffee in a day. Our Indian cups. I'm not talking about the American, the large cups. And second thing is, other useful thing is, I know many runners who take caffeine in the morning before their runs, even black coffee or something, and they do very well, and they vouch for it that it improves their performance. So that also is a good practice. Now coming back to a group of people who are already having a poor sleep or not getting adequate quality of sleep or quantity of sleep, their caffeine could be a culprit. So for that, as early as possible you should have your last coffee. So let's say if you're planning to sleep at 10 p.m., so definitely beyond 6 p.m. try to avoid. And some people can have effects even up to 6 hours. So I know a few runners who stop having coffee at 4 p.m. onwards if they want to sleep at 10. So you decide for yourself. You means the runner should decide for themselves what category they belong to, and if they're not having good sleep, they can definitely try skipping the evening coffee or afternoon coffee and see if the sleep quality improves or not. So barring that, it has no other adverse effects. So coffee is good, but late evening coffee should be avoided in a person who is having sleep issues.
So I can guilt-free have my next coffee post this episode. And as you mentioned that some people have 6 to 8 hours. I know a friend of mine who has a coffee in the morning at 10 and will say that I couldn't sleep till 12 at midnight, right? So like my friend stopped taking coffee altogether.
I'm the opposite.
Um,
I can have a coffee at 9 and still go to sleep at 10.
Yeah, 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 yeah. So, so doctor, sleep is affected when, and this is also one of our Twitter our readers have actually shared with us. The question is that sleep is affected when our workouts are later in the evening or a post or even when we have a very hard race. So I remember initially when I used to have these hard races, I had tough time to sleep at night, right? So, can you tell us what is going on in our body that affects sleep in these cases and what can be done?
Yeah, again, it's a very important question. In fact, there are two sub questions in this. So one is the regular exercise and the workouts. Are they good in the evenings and will they affect the sleep quality or not? And second part was, once we had a very, very hard run in the morning, what to do in the night if you're not getting sleep. The first part is more important because many people get time in the evenings only for their workouts because they start for their work in the morning, so they don't have morning time. So the good news for those people is that working out in the evenings is totally safe. It is not going to interfere with your sleep. Many studies have been done, but provided if you don't do very very vigorous or strenuous, like say if you're planning hit, or let's say if you're planning to run at say sub 4 or that pace, so possibly that you should keep for the mornings, when you have time in the mornings. But if you're having an easy run, which is your easy run, let's say, which is 20 to 25% lower than your best pace, you could always do those runnings in the evenings. Same thing applies for gym workouts, also can be done in the evenings. The studies have actually found that those who do workouts in the evenings, they have a better quality of sleep on those days. So that part we are very clear. So avoid strenuous or vigorous workouts in the evening. And other thing is the timing. Let's say if you're planning to sleep at 10 p.m., you should not start working out at 9 and from 9 to 9:45 and then expect to sleep. So the it says that at least 60 minutes before your sleep time you should finish your workout. The best is 90 minutes before your sleep onset time. But if you can't, then at least 1 hour before your sleep time, you should have finished your workout. So the second part of your question was, once we had a very hard day, we ran a marathon, or it was train was very very tiring. What to do? So mostly it comes down to the recovery. One is that it could be psychological if you have not done well as per expectation. So there you still need to pamper. There is next day, tomorrow is going to come, and you had a finish. It doesn't matter timing and other things. So we have to come out of that. The physiological, there could be aches and pains, and there are various techniques for recovery. So cool down, some people immerse their muscles in ice, and gentle massage. Vigorous massage is not recommended because muscles are already sore. So on the day of marathon, one should not go for vigorous or massage. Gentle massage may be fine, but just resting and relaxing. And in fact, most often it's the other way. If you've had a good run in the morning, you will feel sleepy and you usually fall asleep. So that shouldn't be a big issue.
So I want to ask you one of the questions which I missed out is, are there any dietary habits that can affect sleep? And do you have any suggestions on diet that we should avoid, or specific nutritional best practices to improve sleep?
See, there are 2 or 3 points I would like to mention. One is early dinner. So, early dinner is good for runners and everyone in general. So when I say early dinner, it means as early as possible, because again, it applies to people what time they return from office. But at the earliest possible time, it could be even 6 p.m., it could be 7 p.m. And one of the studies, many studies have shown that if one can have dinner, let's say at least 3 to 4 hours before the sleeping time, it helps in many ways. So it helps in GERD. So many people have reflux and acidity, so that can reduce. And then those who are trying to manage weight, it helps in the weight reduction also. If we have a shorter eating window and longer, fasting period. And also, it is said that one should not have a very very heavy dinner. So our good meals are the breakfast and maybe a little bit lunch, but the dinner should be a light one. So that also helps in good sleep. And possibly, if especially those who are doing workouts in the evenings, let's say strength training or sessions, then have a good amount of protein post workout so that the muscles can get the protein for building up. So these are some of the key points about the dinner.
Understood. So, so, um, so, doctor, a lot of us also experience, a lack of sleep due to anticipation or nervousness if there is a race the next day, or a big workout. So, how can we tame our nerves during these times and get good sleep? And what are some of the common techniques?
Yes, it. I think the biggest problem what I have seen and what many runners have also seen is the start time of the races, because mostly it will be starting at, say, flag off time is 5 a.m. or 6 a.m., and from the place where you're staying, it may take, say, half an hour, 1 hour to reach that the starting place point, and then the parking and other issues. So you may have to wake up at 3:30 in the morning. So already your sleep quantity, on the race day, race night, the night before the race is less. And then the second part is the anxiety also. So this is natural, for some people they're anxious. It's like an exam for them, whereas we have other group of people who don't worry about the outcome. So basically, one should not fixate. What I normally do is, don't get fixated on the, say, target. Let's say most of us say sub 2, or those are all doing sub 2. I have to improve on my previous timing, I should go for personal best. So those things are good. I think on the race day, on the track, just feel how you are going, how your body is responding, and then go for it on that day. So once we have and then also this kind of competition, that I should be better than so and so, or those who are in the podium, I should get the podium. So once we think of the outcomes, then things get nasty. But if we look at the process, and then it's one has to enjoy it, because if earlier the spirit of marathon and long distance running is to enjoy the process, complete it. It is not a competition with anybody else, and not even with self also. It is for the health and the fitness. So once we have this kind of different outlook, definitely it'll help. And other things which I mentioned, warm shower before the sleep, listening to soothing music, and meditation, many of these things can help. You can talk to somebody who you are close with, and get relaxed.
Sure. So, outcome is something that makes us anxious, which I totally agree. I agree, and I so relate to it. So, doctor, the lack of sleep can also be because of inherent health reasons, right? Which could be physiological or neurological. And I would like to understand: are there any signs or symptoms of these kind of sleep disorders, and how can we identify and seek for medical help?
Yes, I will discuss the common issues that we see. One is something called as OSA, obstructive sleep apnea. So the common symptoms of that will be snoring. So once you have somebody who's snoring, so you know that that person, and they are slightly on the overweight side. It can happen in lower normal weight people also. So that is one thing which is commonly seen, and we can diagnose with the help of what is called as sleep studies, and then there are various methods to treat them. And then other thing what we normally see is something called as night terrors, or so dreams are common part, normal part of our sleep. Sometimes those dreams can be scary, and so there's nothing to worry about. We have to discuss with the doctor, and there are ways to tackle them. And one of the scary things but rare things can be what is called sleep paralysis. So in sleep paralysis, what happens is our muscles are still weak, hands and legs cannot move. So basically, in the sleep time, the brain is switched off and also the body is switched off. So our muscles are relaxed, we cannot move. But in sleep paralysis, what happens is the brain wakes up, but the muscles are still paralyzed or not sleep or not woken up, and that can last for few minutes only. But that time is very scary because the person has woken up, but he cannot move. He or she cannot move. But again, that happens in people who are generally anxious, and there are ways to tackle that. One more thing we see rarely is called somnambulism, where person has sleepwalking. So luckily, these things are not so common disorders, and if someone has them, they can discuss with the doctors, and there are ways to come out of it. The commonest is possibly OSA, sleep apnea, which for which I find that the overweight and obesity is the biggest risk factor, and controlling weight can take care of most of the cases.
Understood. So, doctor, sleep monitoring, right, is a good way to understand what's happening while we are not awake. And can you discuss the importance of sleep monitoring and what tools and techniques do you recommend for tracking sleep?
See, if those runners, because this is meant for runners, many runners may be having a watch which monitors sleep for them. I use Garmin, so it has a sleep monitor, which is fairly accurate. And I know many other smart watches also measure sleep. So that is one simple way of doing it. But it's not that we need to monitor every day, because generally, once you have a good sleep and you feel fresh the next day and everything is good, you don't need to monitor so frequently. But if you suspect that you may not be sleeping well, or in the morning you are having you feel little not so fresh and tired, then it could be a good idea to start off with that at house using one of the smart watches. But if you're not very clear, then it is a time to visit the doctor and get the something called as sleep studies done. And sleep studies nowadays can be done at home also. So the technician will come with the sleep machine and fix at home also. So we don't need to spend a night in the hospital. So these are in graded manners. If you are totally well, no problems, doing well, no need to monitor, or just monitor occasionally. Otherwise, as I mentioned, we can do that.
Understood. So, doctor, we've come to the last part of today's episode, and I would like to ask you if you have any tip or practice that you would recommend to our listeners to incorporate in their daily routine to improve their sleep quality and thus improve their running performance. What would it be?
Yes, the first thing is to accept the fact that sleep is important. So it's not that sleeping is wasting time. Like when we were kids, our teachers and parents, they made us feel that you should not sleep much, just study, keep studying. So many times we may feel that sleeping is like wasting time. It's not. Sleeping is one of the most powerful ways of maintaining good health and also to improve running performance. So all runners should aim to get 7 to 9 hours of sleep. Those who are elite runners or those who clock high mileage in a week aim for 8 hours at least. And for that, it is the sleep hygiene is important. So fix up a time, say 10 to 5 or 11 to 6, whatever time suits you, and then and stick to that schedule by not altering by more than 30 minutes. Have a good comfortable bed, because as I said, one third of our life will be sleeping. So definitely we need a good room with a good temperature, because the sleep is best in lower temperatures, so 18 to 90 degrees. So most now summer months are coming, so we need to use AC. So comfortable temperature, comfortable bed, and then light should be off, because during when the lights are on, the melatonin hormone, which is the sleep hormone, doesn't get released. So switch off the lights. And the biggest problem in today's world is the electronic gadgets, and we're all hooked on to our smartphones. So it is better to keep the phones away for, it is set 30 minutes before the sleep time. But what I would say is that if you're not able to do that, at least when you're sleeping, keep the phone in a place where your hand cannot reach. Otherwise, there's a tendency to reach the phone, and once you open any app, you will get addicted. You'll have to see messages, you may want to reply, and then how 30 to 60 minutes go, you may not realize. So keep that device away. We discussed about the dinner, that dinner should be light, not very heavy, and about 3 to 4 hours before the sleep time. And so I think these are some of the things. And then we also mentioned that sometimes a little warm shower, a bit of meditation, listening to some good music, soothing music, all that can help in a person who's not able to get good sleep. And then those who are not able to get the entire sleep quota at night, there is no harm in completing that lost sleep in the form of afternoon naps. So that is, these are some of the tips I would like to give. And avoid medications. One thing is, because nowadays you may have a doctor friend or somebody, or a chemist, or pharmacist, who may give you the sleeping pills, but they're addictive. So sleeping pills are not a good solution. And but always take with the advice of a doctor. And we discuss about alcohol is a strict no. Caffeine, it depends on, varies from person to person, but those who have sleep issues, avoid coffee closer to the bedtime.
Understood. So, thank you, Doctor. Have a great year ahead and have a great running season. All the best.
Thank you.
I would like to thank all our listeners, and if you like this episode and would like to know more on the world of running, please subscribe to our channel. And if you know of someone who is starting their journey into fitness and running, do share our podcast link with them. I would like to thank my friend Arvind for editing, sound recording, and taking care of the post production for this podcast. If you have any suggestions on improving the content of the show or topics you would like us to cover, please share it by emailing us at connect@geeksonfeet.com. Or you can also reach us through Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram.